What happens when a woman stops chasing? When a woman stops chasing, something extraordinary happens. Not because she becomes cold, not because she stops caring, but because she finally remembers who she is. A woman who stops chasing is not giving up. She is waking up. She realizes that her worth is not proven by how hard she tries to be chosen. Her value is not measured by how much she tolerates. Her strength is not defined by the people she loses, but by the woman she becomes. When a woman stops chasing, she starts attracting, because her silence becomes louder than her words, her standards become stronger than her feelings, her presence becomes more powerful than her effort. When a woman stops chasing, she finally understands this truth. If someone truly wants her, she will never have to run after them. If someone values her, she will feel it, consistently, clearly, honestly. If someone sees her worth, they will move toward her, not away from her. And once she learns that, she stops explaining, stops begging, stops proving, stops shrinking herself just to fit into someone else's comfort zone. She stops giving chances to people who only give her confusion. She stops prioritizing people who treat her like an option. She stops breaking her own heart just to keep someone else comfortable. When a woman stops chasing, her energy shifts. She becomes calm, more focused, more grounded, because she knows that whatever is meant for her will never have to be forced. When a woman stops chasing, she elevates, she grows, she glows, her power returns, her peace returns, her identity returns. And suddenly, the same people who weren't sure about her, the same people who took her for granted, the same people who ignored her effort, start wondering why she isn't chasing anymore. They start noticing the silence, they start feeling the distance. They start realizing the value she always had, but they never appreciated. This is the irony. The moment she stops chasing is the moment they start. Not because she changed who she is, but because she finally stopped handing her worth to people who never earned it. A woman who stops chasing becomes a woman who is followed, respected, chosen by the right people, not the wrong ones. So if you're that woman today, if you feel tired, drained, unappreciated, if you feel like you've been running after people who aren't running toward you, listen closely. You don't need to chase. You don't need to convince. You don't need to prove your worth. You just need to remember who you are. Because when a woman stops chasing, she doesn't lose anything. She finally stops losing herself. And that's when everything she deserves finally finds her. When a woman remembers her worth, there comes a moment in a woman's life when she pauses, looks at the energy she's been pouring out, and finally asks herself, why am I running after what doesn't run toward me? And that moment changes everything. Because when a woman stops chasing, she isn't becoming distant, she is becoming aware. Aware of her value, aware of her effort, aware of the imbalance she has been carrying for far too long. She realizes that love shouldn't feel like a competition, attention shouldn't feel like a reward, and connection shouldn't feel like a desperate attempt to prove she's enough. She begins to understand that chasing someone requires her to abandon parts of herself, her peace, her dignity, her boundaries. And for what? For temporary affection? For inconsistency? For the illusion of being chosen? No. A woman who wakes up to her worth stops begging for space in someone else's life. She no longer tries to fit where she was clearly not meant to belong. Instead, she stands up straighter, breathes deeper, and reconnects with the power she forgot she had. Her worth becomes non-negotiable. When she stops chasing, her energy changes. A woman's energy is one of the most powerful forces on earth. When she is chasing someone, that energy leaks. It drains. It weakens. Because she is putting her strength into holding on to something that isn't holding on to her. But the moment she stops chasing, her entire presence shifts. It becomes calm, grounded, magnetic. The desperation dissolves, the fear disappears, the anxiety that comes from wondering whether she matters fades away. She no longer checks her phone 20 times for a reply that never comes. She no longer rearranges her life for someone who can't make basic effort. She no longer apologizes for wanting clarity, respect, or consistency. Instead, she invests that energy back into herself, her goals, her peace, her confidence, her spirit. And as she pours into herself, something beautiful happens. Her glow returns, her intuition sharpens, her emotional boundaries harden. She begins attracting experiences and people who match her value rather than diminish it. She becomes the kind of woman who doesn't chase because she knows she doesn't have to. Silence becomes her power. A woman who stops chasing becomes silent, not out of anger but out of understanding. Her silence is not empty, it is full of clarity, full of lessons, full of unspoken truths she no longer wastes breath explaining. Because she has discovered that people hear what they want to hear, see what they want to see, and appreciate what they're ready to value. So she stops forcing it. She no longer pleads her case. She no longer repeats herself. She no longer tries to convince someone of her importance. Her silence becomes her boundary. Her silence becomes her protection. Her silence becomes the space where she chooses peace over emotional chaos. And in that silence, everything becomes clear. Whoever truly wants her will step forward. Whoever respects her will speak up. Whoever values her will show it, and whoever doesn't will fade out naturally. Her silence speaks the truth she never needed to shout. I will no longer abandon myself just to feel chosen. That truth becomes the foundation of her new strength. The shift from chasing to attracting. When a woman stops chasing, something surprising happens. The dynamic reverses. Suddenly, the same people who once treated her effort lightly begin to feel her absence. The calls she used to make stop. The messages she used to send don't come anymore. The emotional labor she used to carry is no longer on her shoulders, and the people who once took her for granted feel the shift like a cold wind. They start noticing the quiet. They start noticing her peace. They start noticing the glow she has without them. Because when she stops chasing, she stops giving unearned access to her heart. She stops over-explaining. She stops lowering her standards. She stops putting others on a pedestal while she sits on the floor, and the energy she once poured outward begins pulling inward. Strong, centered, magnetic. That energy becomes irresistible, but not because she wants attention, because she no longer needs it. She becomes a woman who attracts naturally, because everything about her says, I know what I deserve, and that, more than anything, is what draws the right people in. The right people show up, the wrong people exit. When a woman stops chasing, she creates a filter that only the right people can pass through. The ones who were never invested, they drift away. The ones who only wanted her for convenience, they vanish. The ones who weren't sure about her suddenly become irrelevant. And that's not a loss, it's a cleansing. Because when she stops chasing, she finally sees who is willing to meet her halfway. Who is willing to show effort without being prompted? Who is capable of giving consistency, not excuses? The wrong people fall off because access to her is no longer effortless, and the right people rise because they see her worth clearly and want to be near it. No woman loses by stopping the chase. She simply uncovers truth. She simply reveals character. She simply discovers who is meant to stay and who is meant to go. When she stops chasing, she creates space for real love, real respect, real intimacy, real honesty. Things she could never experience while running after the wrong ones. When she stops chasing, she finds herself again. At the end of it all, when a woman finally stops chasing, she returns to the one person she should have never abandoned, herself. She reconnects with the version of her that knew her worth before the world made her doubt it. She rebuilds the confidence that was chipped away by inconsistency. She restores the boundaries she once softened for people who didn't deserve them. She rediscovers the dreams she put on hold while chasing someone who couldn't even meet her halfway, and with every step she takes back into her own life, she becomes stronger. Softer in the right ways, tougher in the necessary ones, more confident, more peaceful, more aligned. She becomes a woman who doesn't settle, doesn't beg, doesn't chase, and because of that, she becomes unstoppable. When a woman stops chasing, she doesn't lose love. She doesn't lose opportunities. She doesn't lose connection, she loses the things that were blocking them. And that's when everything meant for her finally begins to find its way to her. Because a woman who chooses herself becomes a woman the world cannot overlook.